Good evening, gospel revolutionaries around the whole world. We hope you're having it. This thing's always asking me questions now that it never used to do. All right, good evening. It's good to have you here with me in the bonus room above my sister's garage. We are certainly glad that the professionalism is not what you are watching this video for, but to hear some good news and some accurate news. News that you can get out of your own Bible. We're not looking for somebody else's book. We don't have somebody's book to offer you, not even my own. So many people, when you ask them a question about what they are teaching, they want to recommend to you a book that they learned it from. And if you have to recommend a book to explain what you think, then I think you're going to get described here in this little teaching here this evening. I can't get away from Galatians. I'm not going to offer an apology. I may be teaching on Galatians for the rest of my life because this is where world history changed. This is where Christianity took hold and the gospel was pushed to the side. Yes, you heard me exactly right. This is where that Christianity took hold. This is where Catholicism took hold and the gospel was pushed to the side. Now, it's not like this was done in secret or in a side room somewhere, like all of the conspiracy theories that you hear about everything on the earth. This was done right out in the open and nobody pays attention to it. We're always looking for something that's hidden somewhere or something done surreptitiously. But this, Paul saw was going on surreptitiously, if you will, and he just brought it right out in the open. He just confronted these guys 100%. And I remember it's just been a few weeks ago that as I was reading down through the book of Galatians again, and I realized that Paul's rebuke of Peter actually turned into a whole sermon. I thought it was just the one line where he said, "Why do you, as a Jew, are you requiring the Gentiles to live like Jews when you, as a Jew, are living like Gentiles?" That's a fair question, right? And not only that, but Paul lays the groundwork for this. And I hope that you do get the gravity. Maybe if I repeat this 100 times between now and this time next year, maybe it'll grab our attention as much as it deserves. This deserves to have an attention focused on it. Any church on planet Earth should be teaching for a solid month on nothing else but the book of Galatians and taking it for face value for what it says. Because the book of Galatians is that point that explains the difference between James, Peter, and John's teachings and Paul's teachings. This is where Paul confronts these guys with his gospel and calls them out about theirs and says that their gospel is not a gospel at all. Zip, zilch, it's just not a gospel. Now, guess what we are left with in modern day Christianity, and that includes Catholicism down through every branch and breed of Protestantism I know of. We have James, Peter, and John's theology is what the church operates on, not the gospel of Paul. We've been going into and studying what is called the pseudographical writings in the New Testament, where that things were added to, especially Paul's teachings. But it's been known for years that the New Testament books got fooled around with. And we know who fooled around with them. And we know that by the time that the canonization began to take place, that these New Testament books had been handled quite a bit. In fact, if you go looking for the originals of any of the New Testament books, you're not going to find any of them. because the people in charge, were there people in charge of them? Yes, there were people in charge of them. The Catholics were in charge of this, what became the Catholic Church. And they kind of took the doctrines of Peter and inserted them into Paul's teachings. I can prove it. We just went through the book of Colossians, and it's amazing. I can't wait to release it. You're going to love it. You're going to get to read the book of Colossians without the inserted pseudographical writings of whoever it was. And we'll let you make up your own mind who you think it is. But you're going to find the exact statements made in Paul's writings that are made in Peter's writings. They're totally different. I'm not here to talk about the pseudographical writings. We're in a letter that I don't know that there's any pseudographical writings in at all in the book of Galatians. This is all Paul. And that's one of the reasons that I love this. And because it is a confrontation that is recorded in the book of Acts, a confrontation of doctrine, a confrontation of gospels, of which Paul again said that theirs was no gospel whatsoever. So let's look down through here in verse 11 of Galatians chapter 2. I don't know how far we'll get, but you've got to understand that when Paul starts here, whether I get through this or not tonight, you need to keep reading, because this from here all the way to the end of verse 21 is Paul's sermon rebuke. It is a sermon rebuke of Peter, and he's addressing Peter's collision that has gone on in his mind to where that he is now interjecting legalism and Judaism into the gospel. Yes, Peter was doing that. At one time, Peter is recorded in the book of Acts of actually understanding the gospel. But it tells here what happened to Peter. And it's right here. Let me start reading before we get too caught up. In verse 11 of Galatians chapter 2, but when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to the face, because he was to be blamed. Now, let me see here. He was the one at fault. I'm just checking out the Greek here. I didn't check that particular word as we went into this. So here he is. He says that when Peter came to Antioch, he says, I withstood him to the face. For before that certain came from James, he did eat before certain. Now, who's the certain here? Before that, this person, this James or Peter, before Peter came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. And we know that that is true, because remember, that was Jesus' specific instruction to him in a vision where he let down a sheet from heaven with all manner of four-footed beasts in it and unclean things. And Peter told Jesus, after Jesus told Peter, rise, kill, and eat, Peter said, Jesus, I ain't doing it. Now, can you imagine somebody's doctrine being so strong they would tell Jesus no? That's how strong-headed Peter was. That's why everything that Jesus ever told him, he had to tell him 3 times. It didn't make any difference what it was. He had to tell him 3 times every time. There's a reason that the word Peter means rock for some reason, I guess. For before that certain came from James. Now you got to realize that James had inserted himself into the leadership of the church at Jerusalem. There is no record of why James did this. We've been doing a lot of study about the lineage of the throne of David, and I'm absolutely convinced that James believed, because Jesus was the lineage of the throne of David, that James felt that he was supposed to take this position up and stay there as he did the whole time. He stayed there like a king. He didn't go out. James didn't go spread the gospel. James stayed in the temple like a king. He stayed there and never left, because you see, when you're concerned about losing your position of power, you don't leave the castle. And in this situation, the castle was the temple. There is no record that James ever left the temple once he took up there. And it says, for before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles. So who is he? He is Peter. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of or out of the circumcision. Now, who was of the circumcision? It's the same guy listed here, and that's James. Now, Jesus had told Peter that partaking with the Gentiles was something he, in fact, ordered him to do. But now this has become something that James has ordered Peter not to do. Don't eat with the Gentiles. Now, what does it say was Peter's mental and emotional state toward James? And why did he do this? Why, after hearing from Jesus personally, did Peter refuse to eat with the Gentiles? It says, fearing them which were of the circumcision. Peter was deathly afraid of James. Now, if you read James's letter, you might think, yeah, I can see where you might be afraid of this dude. The only thing we know for sure about James is he didn't like rich people. People with money were evil, and that's just, you can't read it any other way. When you write 5 short chapters, and it's the only ones in the entire New Testament, when you write 6 short chapters, and 5 times you spend a good deal of time just berating and condemning people that have money. It's just they are the reason that everything has gone wrong, is people that have money. So Peter had developed this intense fear of James. Now, I'm not sure that that's how that the church was intended to be run. In fact, I am quite sure that that is not what was intended. He says, and the other Jews, not only Peter, but he says, and the other Jews dissembled likewise with him. Now, the word dissembled is a Greek word, and I'm going to try my best to say this for you. The Greek word is sunopokrinoma. Sunopokrinoma. That's pretty good, isn't it? Sunopokrinoma. Say it with me. Pseudopokrinoma. So Peter and all the Jews pseudopokrinoma. And that word means to act hypocritically in concert with. So this was a very hypocritical. Now, what was Paul saying was hypocritical? It was hypocritical that they were not eating with the Gentiles. It's called hypocrisy. And they joined in, other Jews joined in this hypocrisy, likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas, are you kidding me? Now, if you think that it can't happen to you, if you think that you cannot be pulled away into legalism, look who got pulled away. Barnabas got pulled away with them. This man traveled with Paul. He was at campfires. He was at camp meeting. He was in the synagogue. He was where Paul was so many times in his life. And he says that even Barnabas also was carried away. Now, the word carried away is the word sunapego. Now, I like that one. It's easier to say. And the word sunapego means to take off together, to transport, transport with, seduce, passively yield. Let me tell you something. You better become a critical thinker for yourself of what I say or anybody else out there. Because it's real easy. I don't care whether it's politics or gospel or what it is. It could be on any subject. But it's real easy to get carried away with the crowd. It's real easy to turn your brain off and just yield to what's being poured out on you. Because what's being poured out on you may not be the truth. You better find out for yourself. You better check with some other sources. You better check and source it out yourself. You really should make sure that you are thinking for yourself. Because if you think you can't get just utterly transported, I mean, this can be an emotional experience. You just get, oh my goodness, it's just, oh wow, the rapture of it all. It can be transporting. But you should never, ever study the scriptures in a passive or yielding way to anybody, including me. Don't ever do that. Study and research. And if you're not a researching and studying type of person, at least check up and see if what's being said is true or not. Now, everybody has access to this concordance. The one that I'm studying from, there's others that actually are better than the Strong's, but the Strong's gives us a good overview of this. But there's, like I say, there are others. But anybody has access to this. I use what's called a Power Bible. And it's a program, and I'm going to ask you guys that if you want to follow along when we're doing these studies, all you have to do is go into Google and Google Power Bible CD 5.9. That's the version that I use. Power Bible CD 5.9. And you can download this. And if you have any problem downloading it, this is one of those sites that really wants you to have this. They have a 1-800 number where you can call them and they'll help you. And so don't be concerned. You'd say, I'm just not techie. I'm not techie either. And I've helped a lot of people get acquainted with this. And it's very easy to use. It's very user-friendly. And if you can't figure it out, call me. I'll help you with the basics of it. It's actually a very profitable thing for you to be able to look at this stuff for yourself. So he said all of these guys were carried away, and they all it was something that they yielded to, and with their dissimulation. So. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel. Now, see, this is not just an issue he had. He said they're not teaching the gospel. He said that James, Peter, and John, and now Barnabas, was not even embracing the gospel at all. Then this is where the sermon starts, and this is where my time is going to end. I thought it was important that we go through this. I know we've done this in to some degree before, but folks, we can't take this lightly. Like I said, this is where world history changed. This is where world history yielded to the teachings of James, Peter, and John. And you'll find out that Paul's rebuke here in the book of Galatians, it didn't work on the people at Galatia. This is one of the churches in Asia. And Paul later says, all they that are at Asia, the Galatians, have forsaken me. Has the whole church forsaken Paul? If you're being told that you have to believe to be right with God, you have fallen to the deception of the teachings of James, Peter, and John. Paul tried to straighten out this mess in so many different ways. He did an excellent job at it here in this book, in the book of Romans, as a powerful book where he confronts personal faith. It is by the faith of Christ, which is something he addresses in his rebuke of Peter. You come back next week and we'll go through it. Love you guys. Hang in there. Don't passively yield to just everything that you hear, including me. I'm not saying I'm the one you should listen to. I'm telling you, you should not passively yield just because it confirms a bias that you already have. Challenge your own thinking. Challenge that you might be wrong. I go around with that attitude all the time. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Guess what? I could be wrong. Because it's not so painful finding out you're wrong when you finally find out that you are right. Now that you found out you're wrong. Love you guys.